first ever Liberty Blue podcast trade deadline live reaction show. The only show where we know as much as the NHL insiders because the NHL insiders don't actually know anything. And it's going to be a very fun but brief episode. Gonna take you guys till about 3:30, maybe 4 o'clock. If anything happens over that 3 o'clock deadline, keep you interested. Got a guest or two lined up to come stop in, talk a little bit about what's going on around the league today. It's been a busy day. There's been a handful of trades trickling in across throughout the day. We got the fancy little ticker down at the bottom of the screen, so we feel like we're important. I'm going to go bump this on my Twitter 1 second. Gotta take care of the business so people can come hang out for a little bit. There's a lot to talk about. The most recent trade I just saw is Rangers legend Dryden Hunt just got traded to the Calgary Flames. That's an interesting one. The Flames have been kind of mired in this weird in between all season. If you follow me, you know I do Locked On Flames a couple times a week. I'm gonna do a special episode of that later this afternoon, and we're gonna talk a little bit more about the Flames and the bigger picture. But today, there's been a lot of those trickle-in trades. You saw Pittsburgh trade for Nick Bonino, Dmitry Kulikov. You saw the Devils trade for Curtis Lazar. There's been a handful of those type of little trades, the depth guys to kind of fill out your lineup, because we've seen all of the big fish kind of get moved already. You saw Timo Meyer get moved. You saw Kane, Tarasenko, Chikrin finally got moved. There's a lot of moving parts in the NHL, and the macro level part of this I find very interesting is that most teams, most of the time around this time of year, we know there's a handful of teams that are interested in buying. But this year, you have seen teams that are in that middle of the pack, like the Sabres went out and added some guys. You saw teams like the Islanders go out, and they were not in a playoff spot when they traded for Bo Horvat a month ago. They still went out and did it, and now the Islanders are relatively close to being a safe bet to get in as that second wild card. The Penguins, when it looked like all was said and done, it looked like the Penguins were dead in the water 2 weeks ago. They had no goaltending. Their third line was a black hole. They were kind of out in the abyss, but they've rattled off four in a row. They were able to get rid of Kapanen. They were able to get rid of Brock McGinn. They bring in Michael Granlund, and today they bring in Dmitry Kulikov and Nick Bonino, who, of course, was on the team when they won the Stanley Cup a couple years ago. The Penguins waited and waited. They'd been linked to JT Miller. They'd been linked to Brock Besser. Instead, they opted for more of these bottom of the lineup guys, kind of fill out the roster. And it's not a coincidence that you see all of these teams in the Eastern Conference going as aggressively as they have this deadline. I haven't even mentioned the Leafs. I haven't mentioned the Bruins. Both of those teams added significant pieces. I mean, the Bruins added Bertuzzi, Garnet Hathaway, Dmitry Orlov. The Leafs added Jake McCabe. They added Ryan O'Reilly. They added Sam Lafferty. There is a real arms race going on in the Eastern Conference right now because all of these teams realize that they're going to be in direct competition with each other. You saw the Rangers, they opted for big name guys. They went out and got Tarasenko, they got Kane, and said, we're going to try and build on our strengths. We're already a transition team that relies on a lot of skill. We're going to add more skill to that mix and hope that's enough to make a difference for us. And you see teams like Carolina opt for more targeted moves, specialized moves, where Jesse Puljujarvi, that's your Jesper Fast replacement for next year. Shane Gostisbehere, solid defenseman, kind of offensive or definitely offensive oriented. Everyone remembers that rookie season he had with the Flyers a number of years ago. Really good numbers. Kind of went to Arizona when Arizona was really getting their Island of Misfit Toys program underway there. Added a bunch of guys out in Arizona. I mean, you saw that. I haven't mentioned Edmonton, who went out and added a couple small guys. I like Ekholm for them. I think the West being as open as it is, and leads you to believe that anybody can come out of the West. Whereas in the East, it kind of feels like there's the 5-6 teams that are clearly at the top, and then the rest of the East is fighting for table scraps to get in as those two wild cards. Because the Bruins, they already broke 100 points, and it's the first week of March. The Leafs and Lightning, they've been circling each other since the end of round one of last year's playoffs. Nick Paul, everybody laughed at Nick Paul last year when the Lightning gave up what they did for him. He won game 6 of that first round series against the Leafs. They ended up winning that series. They went to the Cup final again. The Lightning had Tanner Jeannot. I mean, sure. They gave up a ton to get a Tanner Jeannot, but all of this is good. That's the undercurrent, and something I was thinking about a lot today is I like that there's been this much activity this year, and that a lot of these teams, even the teams that aren't in a playoff spot, they're still adding. Like most years, there are a lot of teams that are content to just sit on their hands, add a depth player or two, maybe try and shed some salary. And if they get in, great, and they lose in the first round, whatever. We made the playoffs. We get 3 extra home games of revenue to sell in the playoffs. Great. This year, you are seeing teams that are not locked into playoff spots go for it. Like I said before, you saw the Islanders do it. You saw the Wild a couple weeks ago. Wild were not in a playoff spot up until a couple weeks ago. Now they're sitting in second in the West, in the Central Division. Dallas is in first, Minnesota second, Colorado third. Minnesota was kind of on the outside looking in with the Flames, like as recently as like 2-3 weeks ago. Like I did an episode of Locked On Flames with my co-host Jess Belmosto. I'd say the first week of February, around the 40-game mark, where we discussed if we thought the Flames would be a playoff team or not. And we were firmly in agreement that the main team the Flames would be in competition with for that wild card, that second wild card spot, would be the Minnesota Wild. Turns out the Minnesota Wild just said, we're going to get good at defense again. And the goaltending has kind of sorted itself out, and they've been on a nice little run. They shed some salary today, trading Jordan Greenway to Buffalo. Another example of a team that's on the outside, Buffalo, adding asset, giving up an example of a team on the outside looking in, adding a player that might be useful this year, but definitely could be useful going forward. Somebody, Greenway, a little bit more of a defensive-oriented forward, somebody who's going to be good on the forecheck, suppress chances against. Not great offensively, but you do need those types of guys in the bottom six. So we're going to have a guest in a few minutes, Hunter Hodes of Locked On Penguins, of SI Now, a couple different places, just to talk a little bit more of the macro level. And I'm fascinated with where the NHL is at big picture, because the values of assets are so inconsistent trade to trade, which leads me to one of my recurring theories and something I've always felt right about. Everybody watches hockey differently. Even the professional talent evaluators are not watching the game the same way as each other. It's why you see such vastly different asset costs for different players. Jacob Chikrin's been trying to get traded for like 2.5 years now, and he got traded for a first and 2 seconds. And yeah, one of the seconds can become another first if the Senators make the conference finals. More than likely, the Senators aren't even going to make the playoffs. But that's your asset cost when you realize the Lightning gave up 5 draft picks total for Tanner Jeannot, somebody who has 5 goals this year. It's really, really just mystifying sometimes when you try and understand value. It's very inconsistent. And yes, every team is different. I know there are a lot of people who are casual hockey fans, are not as in-depth understanding. They don't have cap-friendly bookmarking like I do. Oh, there is the man himself. How are we doing, sir?
Look who it is.
How are we doing, Hunter?
Earlier this week was pretty rough, but teams won 4 in a row, and I will say the 2 trades today are looking like small wins, which I did not think I was going to say, because this general manager wants to just have fun with the fan base, I guess.
He's unpredictable. That's the thing, because he's so reserved. He's so patient. It's really hard to ever get a feel for what Ron Hextall wants to do, because he's so willing to be patient in everything.
So it's weird, man. You know, he won't trade the 3 picks to get Jacob Chikrin, who was on their radar. They've been flirting with the Canucks about JT Miller. That's been going back and forth. I don't think that's going to happen right now. But then, you know, I will say, they got rid of Kapanen and McGinn. They got out of those contracts. Thankfully, it's just, I wish they didn't have to waste that money on Mikael Granlund and go out and get a bigger fish. He had a decent debut last night, but still, I think they would have been better off saving that cap space somewhere else, to say the least. But Nick Bonino's back. He'll probably take over for probably Teddy Blueger, I should say, on the 4th line. And Kulikov, I'm not even really sure where he slots in, because the 3 guys on the left side, Mike Sullivan loves Brian Dumoulin. Marcus Pettersson has been unreal this season, and P.O. Joseph is playing great as a rookie. So I don't know where he slots in there. And the right guys, you're not taking out Jeff Petrie or Chris Letang. I don't think Jan Ruda's coming out either. So I don't know if there's another move to be made. They haven't fully announced the Kulikov trade yet. It's probably going to come any second now. But I haven't gotten an indication that he's done, so he could be cooking up something else right now.
Yeah, got about 20 minutes to go here. There's a world in which I could see them flipping Kulikov to another team if they could get something useful back. I mean, the Penguins are firmly in that second tier of teams in the East where you've got the 6 teams that are all kind of locked into the division spots, and then you've got like 5 teams all fighting for those second 2 spots. It looks like the Penguins have kind of risen to the top of that group over the last 2-3 weeks, which has helped a lot. Buffalo's kind of dealing with the injury bug right now. No Dolly and no Tuck. That's really kind of hurt them the last couple of weeks. Ottawa's got a really brutal stretch of their schedule coming up, even though they're 11-3 in their last 14. The Islanders, no Barzal. Pajot started skating, but don't know when he'll be back. Florida might sell in the next 20 minutes. I know I've heard that they might be listening on Reinhart. They might be listening on Duclair. So it really does kind of feel like it's going to come down to Pittsburgh, the Islanders, and maybe Ottawa. And that's really it.
Yeah, the Penguins have really done a nice job making up some ground over these last 4 games because they have the math. Like, they have all the games in hand on virtually every team. Buffalo has 1 game in hand on them, but that's really it. I think they still have 3 games in hand on the Islanders, and they're 1 point up on them. What really kills them, Nick, is that they destroyed the Islanders in those 2 games and did not get the goaltending that they should have gotten. They win those 2 games. They're 4 points behind the Rangers right now, and they're potentially looking at them because they have 3 games left against them.
Yep.
So that was a huge missed opportunity, but they've beaten Tampa twice here. They've took care of 2 teams that they should take care of, and all of a sudden they're 5 points up on the 9th place teams, more than likely bearing a ridiculous collapse. And I know how Jekyll and Hyde this team has been this year. I think they should be able to get in. It's just they're going to be going up against one of two juggernauts in the first round, which I'm not thrilled about, to say the least.
Yeah, no, nobody wants to play Boston. You got to get that first wild card. And, like, if you play the Devils, if the Devils can pass Carolina, which I think the Devils are a point back of Carolina, if you can play Carolina versus the Devils, I think that makes a difference. Carolina is good. They give the Penguins a hard time. But for the most part, I think you want no part in New Jersey because I think there's a real argument that the Devils are the fastest team in the entire league.
Yeah, Carolina, people aren't going to like to hear this. Those games were 50-50s this year. 2
They were
overtime. All of them were decided by 1 goal. Penguins played fine in a good chunk of those games. They just had a couple bad defensive errors. That happens. It's a random sport. They easily could have split that series, to be honest. So I would be more comfortable going up against the Hurricanes than I would against the Bruins. You know, whoever gets them, you're probably
good luck.
5, I would say. Maybe that's being generous to say the least there. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. The whole fan base, a lot of the media members want this guy fired, the general manager, of course, but the team is still winning games, which is hilarious at the same time. That just goes to show how great the leadership group is, and Mike Sullivan continues to excel, even though all coaches have shelf lives, I think.
All coaches definitely have shelf lives. I mean, Boston's the perfect indicator of that. Like, Bruce Cassidy is a consensus one of the 5-6 best coaches in the entire league. And the Bruins said, okay, it's time. We need a different voice here. And they changed the coaches, and they're going to have a real chance at breaking the record for most points ever in a season. Ooh, JVR to the Red Wings. That's weird.
Well, Frank just said, I'm hearing no trade right now involving JVR. So Frank is going up against Elliott, which is interesting. Yeah, they're both pretty good.
Frank said at this exact moment. So that leads me to believe that it's probably going to happen. It's just, there's things that got to be finalized. Detroit's been very weird at this deadline. I can't really get a read on what to.
I don't get that.
Because he's an expiring Van Riemsdyk. I mean, like, unless they're like sending money out, maybe, and then this is like an expiring contract type deal where they just want cap space, because I know they traded Vrana for I think like a 6th round pick this morning. So I could see a world in which this is just clearing space if they're sending out money. I think that's a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I mean, it's just funny. Like, you trade Bertuzzi, you trade Sundqvist,
now you trade Roenick.
And that's funny, man. Coming into this week, everyone was like, oh, they're going to buy. They're right there at the playoff spot. They were, point out, 2 ugly losses to Ottawa. You lose last night to, I forget who they lost to last night, but all of a sudden, that's all it takes for Steve Yzerman to be like, hey, you know what? I'm going to change my plans. I'm glad they've shown a lot of progress, but that JVR deal, if that happens, it's just, I don't know. It's kind of
I mean, I saw the asking price was only a 3, which that's not a lot. I would do that. If I was the Rangers, I would have done JVR for a 3 as opposed to Kane or Tarasenko. If you wanted to still bring in one of them, okay. But JVR brings a skill set the Rangers don't have. That's one of the things that makes him interesting is that there just aren't a lot of power forwards in today's NHL. And no, he's not as explosive as a skater as he used to be. He's still one of the better net front presences in the entire league, which that has a lot of value.
No, I mean, I agree. And his underlines are still pretty decent.
Yeah.
Even on a bad Flyers team. And, it's weird. They have really not made any moves outside of this. I don't know what the plan is out there. I think both Pennsylvania teams are on one right now. I thought Kevin Hayes was supposed to be available. I don't know if he's going anywhere.
I think he has a limited no move, which makes it complicated. I mean, every single person the day that contract was signed said that was a bad contract because it just didn't line up with where the Flyers were. The Flyers got one good playoff run out of that group. And that's a shame because that group had a lot of really good players in it. And they got one good playoff run in the bubble.
Yeah, no, they did. They won at least one round and then obviously lost there. But they had a decent little run there with that core before it all just went apart.
Yeah.
Went right after it. And, they're not close right now. I loved how they traded for Brendan Lemieux today. Your tweets were hilarious about that. I had a couple of chuckles, but it's weird that they really haven't done anything. This whole day has been a dud. Usually you see deals flooding in right now. We got 13 minutes left. Really not much going on. I guess the insiders are not being.
I mean, all that's really left, maybe JVR.
Chris Johnson, Nick, he's not going to the Red Wings, JVR.
Okay. All right.
So
that's interesting.
Elliott was fed something there. Not good.
Yeah. I mean, JVR's there, Besser's there, JT Miller is technically there, even though the Vancouver said they're not selling, but because his no move kicks in this summer, which makes it impossible to get out of that contract unless he wants to leave this summer. So that's really it. I mean, there might be smaller guys, maybe Anthony Duclair, maybe Sam Bennett, maybe somebody. I mean, I'm trying to think because I wanted the Flames to go out and add because that group is just so listless and it's been pretty listless the last couple of weeks. I thought Carolina would add somebody more impactful. Like I like Puljujarvi and Gostisbehere for them, but neither of those guys makes a huge impact.
They've been very quiet this deadline. Yeah. It makes me a little uneasy because usually that team would go all in. But yeah, I mean, Gostisbehere's fine. Puljujarvi's fine. I don't think he's going to have a Valerie Nichushkin type renaissance here. I think that's a little too far away. But I figured they would make a pretty splashy ad before the deadline because they have a great shot this year. They obviously got to prove it in the playoffs, but I feel like they have a great shot at going pretty far. And I'm just surprised they really haven't done too much yet,
I mean,
to say the least.
I mean, originally they were one of the teams that was linked to Meyer. They were one of the teams with them, the Devils, and then the Sabres came in kind of late. The Blues came in kind of late on Meyer, but that would have been a great ad for them because it's a tool set they just don't have on their team. And Carolina's run into this issue now a couple years in a row in the playoffs where they're a really good regular season team. But when the time comes for them to play teams in the playoffs that have more talented high-end players, they run into a wall. You saw it against the Rangers last year where Carolina controlled most of that series. And you could say they probably outplayed the Rangers for good stretches of that 7-game series. But when it came time to win the game, it was Shesterkin, it was Zibanejad, it was Panarin. And Carolina doesn't have anybody of that tier. Svechnikov and Aho are both great players, probably top 50, 60 players in the entire league. But neither of those guys can kind of get to that supernova point you need to get over the hump against good teams in the playoffs. So to your point, I did think they were going to be in on Meyer. I'm a little disappointed Erik Karlsson didn't end up getting moved because if he gets moved, then you're talking about really the potential to change the balance of power. Edmonton ended up with, I think, somebody who helps them a little bit more in Ekholm. But there's a world in which they end up with Karlsson, McDavid, Draisaitl, Nuge, and Evander Kane as their PP1 in the playoffs, and the puck's just on a string for 2 minutes straight.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I like Svechnikov. I like Aho. Marty Necas is having a great year down there.
Yes.
He's been very, very underrated for them. Jordan Stahl is still kicking very well. But again, that's been, I think, the problem with them for the last several years. They have good to great talent, but they don't have that game-breaking player that can really just take over a game on a given night. Their defense is obviously solid. Rod Brind'Amour's a great coach. But again, I also don't trust Carolina's goaltending. Freddie Anderson is just made of glass. Antti Ranta is okay. I'm going to call him by his nickname, Coochie, because that's how he goes at this point. That Russian goaltender who's in the AHL but probably should be starting a good chunk of more of their games. It's fine, but I just don't fully trust that tandem either. So, and they didn't win on the road at all last year in the playoffs. I think they went 0-7 overall. So they need to really show something. They had that one run where they went to the conference final. They got swept by the Bruins. But outside of that, it's just been first or second round exit. You've had this core for a while. It's time to really build on it, or else, if they lose in round 1, round 2 again, I think they're going to have to potentially make some serious decisions during the summer.
They kind of got screwed because Pacioretty retore his Achilles, because Pacioretty was exactly what they needed. They needed a bona fide 30-goal guy to slide in that top 6, because they don't have a lot of finishing, because they're a volume team. They're going to shoot you into oblivion, but not a lot of those chances are particularly good, which is why adding somebody of Pacioretty's ilk, who is a bona fide finisher, would make such a difference. Now they've kind of had to go back to this piecemeal depth approach, which in the regular season, over the course of a long 82-game season, is great. If you consistently outchance teams over the course of 6 months, you're going to win more games than you don't. But when you only got 7 and you got to win 4, it becomes a lot more difficult to volume your way to a series win.
And that's why those series they're so volatile. They're so random. Yeah. Short sample sizes, I should say. A lot of times, Nick, you know this too. Sometimes the better team in a series does not win. I mean, we've seen that. I think that was that Minnesota series from a few years ago when they lost to St. Louis or something, and they blew them out of the water, and they just couldn't buy a save. Heck, I think the Penguins, I'm honestly maybe a little bit biased. I think the last 2 years, though, they probably deserved a better fate against the Rangers and the Islanders. They just didn't get the goaltending. They didn't play as well defensively, but I think offensively they outplayed them, but it just didn't go their way. That's the sport sometimes. And you can say that for plenty of other series as well. So the Six are going to get a lot tighter when those series start. And I'm curious to see whoever they play in the playoffs, whether that's Pittsburgh, Buffalo, the Islanders. I'm going to be really curious to see. I don't think it's that bad of a matchup for the Penguins. People are going to say it is. Those 4 games this year were true coin flips. That's how
they were good games. They were very good to watch as a neutral party. That was some very high level hockey being played in those games.
No, they for sure will. The Penguins had leads in a couple of those games. One of them, or two of them went to overtime. They should have won both of them probably at home, to be honest. And then one of the ones in Carolina, they had a lead going into the third period, and they blew that one too. So they deserved a better fate in a couple of those. And I'll say this too. Throw out the team beats you 4 times, that resets to 0 when the playoff starts. That does not mean a thing to me.
Oh, honestly. Hey man, you don't got to tell me about that. Every single Rangers fan went into the bubble puffing their chests out. We swept Carolina 4-0 in the regular season this year, and they got ran off the ice in 3 games. Yeah. The regular season does not matter. It really does not matter when it comes to the playoffs. Speaking of the Eastern Conference, this Bruins forward group might be the best forward group I can recall of anything. Like the Lightning of the 2 Lightning teams are kind of in their own category because of the cap shenanigans, where like they had $110 million worth of players. So like it's kind of hard to compare them to teams that are, at the $82 million mark. But of the last 10 years or so, I don't think I can recall a group that's this deep. Like they've got Zacha and DeBrusk, both 20-goal guys. That third line was playing with Taylor Hall most of this season. Taylor Hall, who won an MVP 4 years ago. I cannot recall a deeper forward group that's operating at the salary cap than the Bruins.
They're nasty, and they continue to get better and better. They don't even need to trot out the perfection line. They can separate.
They don't.
And that's what they're doing. They have Marchand and Bergeron together. They have Krejcik and Pasternak together. And, speaking of an addition, getting Krejci back was so massive for them. They
Yeah.
missed him a lot last season, and you can see just how much of a big addition that is. I know Jim Montgomery is a good coach, but look how good this team is. I think, honestly, Dan Boswell could go out there and maybe coach that team. I'm probably maybe not giving him
Not
enough.
in 2023. In 2015, yes. When Dan Boswell was still kind of had a clue, maybe. Not today.
Yeah, it was probably a little too far. But, they can trot out Trent Frederick down there, Charlie Coyle. They can put Tyler Bertuzzi on their third or fourth line if they want to. They're so deep on defense. McAvoy, Orlov, Lindholm, Carlo, the list goes on. Grizzly. I mean, Allmark's having a great year.
And the best tandem in the league, too, in Swayman and Allmark. Yeah.
Allmark, I mean, he just obviously had a goal, which was awesome. And looks like your Flames just made a trade, by the way. That. Troy Stetcher is going to Arizona from Calgary. Don't know why that's
I mean, they do need a sixth defenseman because they've been playing
Arizona Calgary. Sorry.
Yeah. They've been playing Michael Stone in that 60 spot, and Michael Stone is a 70. That's what he is. He can spot in every now and then, but if he's an everyday player, you're probably not as deep as you would like to be. The Flames' entire plan kind of got screwed by Chillington not coming back because he's been dealing with what he's been dealing with personally, and the players they have just haven't played as good as everyone kind of thought they would. Huberdeau has not settled in well. Kadri started out really well, but he's not playing at a point per game. They've gotten great years out of Toffoli, Backlund, and Coleman, but Mangiapane hasn't been as good as he was last year. They've gotten a really good year kind of out of nowhere from Dylan Dubé, but it's just not there. And the goaltending's been awful. I mean, both goalies are Markstrom's been like 890 all year, and Vladar's been like 903, 904 all year. The goaltending sank the Flames this year. This is a talented forward group. This is one of the better top nines in the entire league, and they lost 23 one-goal games this year. They cannot get a single break. And yeah, Stetcher's a good ad. He's better than Michael Stone, but I think the Flames are kind of dealing with the issue. They have no sense of direction because their GM's a lame duck. He might get brought back. He might not. Darryl might just do both jobs. Darryl might go to become from coach to GM and bring someone in to be the new head coach. But with no direction, I don't think you can, in good faith, go out and give up big assets because you don't know. Like, if you go out and give up all these assets because, hey, maybe I'm not back, and you are back, then you've handicapped yourself going forward. If you don't give up anything like they've kind of done now, and Darryl takes over and Darryl tries to remodel the team to be a little bit more 2016 next year, then the Flames are definitely going to be worse. They've been weird all year, and I think it speaks to the power dynamic problem they've had going on between the coach and GM all year.
Yeah, and it's weird because I had them as a playoff team this year, but everything I think that could go wrong has gone wrong. Markstrom was awesome last season. That has just turned out to be...
He was a Vezina finalist last year, and this year he's below 900.
I mean, it just goes to show how volatile that position truly is, which is just crazy. I mean, I thought they did a great job in the offseason getting what they could for Tkachuk and Gaudreau. I think they did as good of a job as you could replacing them. It's just it really hasn't gone their way this year, and that's just unfortunate.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing, because you can have great intentions and you can slam dunk it on paper. On paper, the Flames are absolutely one of the 16 best teams in the league. It just hasn't come together for them from the goaltending perspective, from the goal scoring perspective, because like Carolina, they're a volume team. They don't really have any high-end finishers without Gaudreau, without Tkachuk, and they rely on point shots. They rely on volume of chances. And it's really hard to score consistently when you're shooting from the perimeter, from the point. And they've got good players on that teir guys having great years. Lindholm is going to be close to a point per game again. I mean, there's a world in which if they take a step back last summer and say, maybe we should kind of retool here, not rebuild, but maybe we take a step back and we go for assets as opposed to players in return for Tkachuk. We go for volume and we try and reset for a year or two going forward. But they said, we think this group is pretty good. We just need to tweak it a little bit. If we bring in one guy, two guys, because you bring in Weegar, you bring in Huberdeau. Huberdeau was a 100-point guy last year, and Weegar's still one of the best defensive defensemen in the entire league. And it just for whatever reason. And that's why I think you kind of have to come to the conclusion that it's on the coach that he's not getting the best out of everybody.
Yeah. And, obviously one of the biggest storylines I saw, Nick, was, Alan Walsh doing his thing, because that,
Correct.
how do I want to say this? Starting over my words, doing the thing that only he can do, I think is the way to say it. He did it with Marc-Andre Fleury. He did it here with Jonathan Huberdeau, and he took a big shot at Daryl Sutter there. And, I don't know if he's going to get canned. I
don't think so.
Think not.
No, because the owner and him are like personal friends, which kind of complicates this entire situation. Because I remember reading a report, I want to say in mid-February, about how that Daryl and the owner just talk outside of the typical chain of command of, the coach talks to the GM talks to the president talks to the owner. But because Daryl and the owner are personal friends, that they just talk directly to each other, which puts the GM in a difficult situation. And Brad resigned. He got a 3-year extension at the start of this year because he signed a 2-year deal he signed a 3-year deal when he originally took the job back in the bubble season in 2021. And now we're kind of all looking at each other like, well, this isn't going to work, but there isn't really, nobody's incentivized to change anything here because Daryl said the other day, I think our team is fine. We just need to play better.
Yeah, that's probably really all it boils down to. I think this summer they're probably going to have to make some more tougher decisions with some of their players, but there's no reason to think that they can't be a playoff team next year. The West is not that good. I mean, this year, the conference is so wide open. It's unbelievable. I don't even know if Colorado is going to get back to the final because they can't stay healthy. Dallas is very good. Vegas is going to get Mark Stone back, which is huge. It's wide open. And I have no reason to think that Calgary can't get back to the playoffs next year if they make the right decisions during the summer. We'll have to see if they have a new GM. But this team is still good. Like they just need to obviously stay more consistent.
They need to be more consistent, and they need to figure out what's wrong with the goaltending. Those are the two big things. We're up against the wire now. It's 3. If anything else trickles in after that, I saw,
BVR was not traded. What are the Flyers doing, man? Like,
Rasmus Asplund from Buffalo to Nashville. Okay, that's interesting. Elliot said something happened with JVR in Detroit, pulled back from deal. So, okay, maybe something came up in the medicals. Maybe they couldn't get someone to take salary, whatever. And wouldn't have made the Flyers are a mess.
I don't know what Chuck Fletcher's doing out there, man. The Flyers look like a freaking ace over here.
The Flyers are my reason why whenever I get somebody who's wearing Oakleys in their pickup truck in my replies telling me I don't know what I'm talking about, I would do a better job than Chuck Fletcher. I guarantee you, bet my life, like at the end of the season, you could kill me if the team didn't do better than they did this year. I guarantee you and I, with $15 of Patreon subscriptions, could do better than Chuck Fletcher is at running a hockey team. I would not be good, but I would not be the worst GM in the NHL. That's all I'm saying.
I would not be good either, but I think I can also do a better job than him as well. I figured I asked, 3 big games between the Pens and Rangers coming up, Nick. I'm pretty sure about
3 games. It's 2 weeks from now.
I
think it's the 18th.
Yeah, week and a half. I think it starts that next Sunday. I think is the first one. I think
because they play 3 games in a week. They play the one game on the Sunday in Pittsburgh. Thursday, I'm going to that one, and then Saturday at the Garden. So it's 3 games in a week.
That's a nice little mini playoff series there after the one from last spring. But it looks like they've hit a little bit of a cold stretch, Nick. Kind of. I know they beat the Flyers obviously, and they took over.
The defense is bad. The defense has been bad. They're playing with only 5D for like a week now, week and a half now. They had to do that, but the team defense. And when I had more than one person say, "Well, they're missing defensemen," it's not just the defensemen who play bad defense. The forwards all need to be better defensively. I mean, Kane and Panarin both on the ice for 2 goals. The kid line on the ice for 2 goals last night. You need to be better defensively, and the penalty kill is like 18th or 19th. That's the difference right now. Before the game against the Flyers on Wednesday, they were averaging 3.13 goals for and 3.13 goals against at 5-on-5 over the last 10. The defense has been bad. prior to them only being able to play 5D. So I think there's plenty of time. I'm not going to make any sweeping like this is or isn't going to work yet. There's time to fine tune this, and that's what the next couple weeks need to be. They need Mott back because they can't. They only have 11 forwards, and we need to see if the NHL is going to allow them to have an emergency call up. And if they have an emergency call up, they need to decide if they're going to bring up a defenseman or a forward because Miller's still suspended through Saturday. But the Rangers have 5 days off between Saturday and their next game. So Miller be back, assume Lindgren be back. So if Mott is out an extended period of time, they would emergency call up a forward. But there's a lot of time for this to work out. I do think they're gonna need to reconfigure the lines just to make it more viable, because right now the way all of the lines are constructed is to trade chances. They are not playing great defensively, and they are trying to turn every game into a track meet. Every game 6-5, 5-4, etc. because of the forwards they have. Zibanejad is their best defensive forward. That's not saying a lot because no one else plays a great defense out of that forward group, but they need more from guys like Kreider, like Panarin, like Kane, like Tarasenko, like Hedel, like Lafreniere defensively, because they are conceding way too much, and the defense is not as good as everyone thinks it is. Aside from Fox and Lindgren, they are flying by the seat of their pants, hanging on for dear life, 40 minutes a game at 5-on-5. When they go shorthanded, it's even worse. The penalty kill hasn't been great this year. I mean, I was looking at it this morning. I actually have it in my drafts. I didn't tweet it. Hang on. I have the numbers right here.
At least Keandre's not super bad, right? He's been pretty
No. He's been okay, but without him, Trouba's kind of hopeless because Trouba can't break out of his own end.
Yeah.
That's the biggest issue, and it's the biggest issue a lot of people don't like. If you're not as in tune with the transition stats, you're not going to notice the little subtleties, but the Rangers' only two defensemen who are good at breaking out of their own zone are Andre, and that's by skating the puck out of danger, and Fox, who's their best breakout guy by far. So Fox and Lindgren, when they're on the ice, the Rangers score 61% of the goals. When Trouba and Miller are on the ice, the Rangers are on the ice for 40% of the goals. When Schneider and Mikkola threw 100 minutes at 5-on-5, 55%. And then Schneider and Harper, that was like December and January, 47% of the goals. So I said it last night, and I think it's still the case. I think Fox is their single most important player because he's the only defenseman who actually tilts the ice. Everybody else, it's hanging on for dear life. And whichever forward group has Fox on with them usually ends up getting better results because he's such a weapon.
Yeah, I mean, I think you tweeted out that Nick last night. He's like, if they want to make a run, he's going to have to play half the games.
He's going to have to play Duncan Keith minutes. He's going to have to play 30 minutes a game, Duncan Keith style, if they're going to make a deep run, because he's their only defenseman who helps.
Yeah, I mean, and he's obviously a very special player. Outside of that, and I like the forward group. I don't think they needed Kane. I don't think he's anything special at this point in his career. He's good, but I mean,
he's better than Gaudreau. He's better than VZ. Fine, whatever. But he's a redundant skill set. They already have Panarin, who insists on passing when the net is wide open. If you watched Kane and Panarin last night, you would think one of them was a Make-A-Wish kid because they kept funneling the puck to each other back and forth. Shoot! No, you shoot! No, you shoot! One of you has to shoot at some point, and it's why my tinfoil hat line combination. I want Hedel in the middle of them. I want Hedel just letting it rip because neither of those guys wants to shoot. Let Hedel let it rip. You put Kakko up with Zibanejad and Kreider to defer a little bit defensively, to be a little bit more responsible and well-rounded. And then you have Lafreniere with Trocheck and with Tarasenko. You have your shooter in Tarasenko, your retriever in Trocheck, and your distributor in Lafreniere. I think those lines will be a little bit more balanced and a little bit better at not conceding as much defensively, because that's the Rangers' issue right now. I mean, it's a little stupid to say that in a game they concede 6 goals because they only have 5 defensemen and 11 forwards. But the defense has not been good for a month now. It's not just the last couple of games where they've been shorthanded. Their next game is against Boston on Saturday, and then they've got 5 days off. they're probably going to have to play 5D again because they're not going to get the emergency recall for at least one more game, and Miller is still suspended. So you're more than likely going to go 11-5 or 12 and if Mott's okay, 12-5. If Mott's not okay, you're going to have to go 11-5 on Saturday. That's a tall order to go 11-5 against the Bruins when you're as dinged up as you are, you're as tired as you are. They've logged a lot of minutes. I'm curious. I don't feel I feel better about this group than I did about the group last year because last year they were just so bad at 5-on-5. Whereas this year, for the most part, the Rangers have been pretty close to a coin flip at 5-on-5.
Yeah.
They're middle of the pack as opposed to bottom 5, which they were for the bulk of last year. So if you're like 18th, 17th at evens, and then you're top 10 on the power play, which they've gotten back up to over the last couple of weeks, and you get the goalie going. That's the other thing. Igor's been good, not great most of the season. He's had a rough last month.
Yeah.
He's had a rough last month, but that's also in part because the defense hasn't been great. They're asking him to do a lot more. So they get Igor going. They get a little bit better defensively. This group's easily more talented than the group they had last year. Easily. It's just a matter of putting it together. That's really the question mark for the Rangers.
No, I agree with that. I think they're a lot deeper at forward this year. Igor, I think people that thought he was going to be 935, 940 again, that's just not how goaltending works in the NHL.
No.
You can't, obviously I know you all were so spoiled because you had Henrik Lundqvist for so long, but,
we got a trade.
John
Klingberg to the Wild.
Okay. I'm guessing he's
LeBron says
going to play with Dumba.
Yeah, LeBron says they got it in before the deadline. That's interesting. The Wild are an interesting team because for so long they were very middle of the pack. They were overly reliant on defense. They get Kaprizov in there. The dynamic of the team changes a little bit. The goaltending has kind of sorted itself out over the last couple of weeks because at the start of February, they were one of the teams that was on the outside looking in and was like, maybe this team's going to be in the mix for a wild card. They're second in the Central right now, and they're only 3 points back of Dallas. That Wild team, the defense has been a lot better as of late. Klingberg, I mean, sure, you're adding depth for the sake of depth. He's an expiring contract, which, okay, you're not worried about it going forward because everybody knows the Wild are going to be in cap hell going forward. But fine, another decent addition. Today's been all about the depth. I thought maybe outside chance, maybe Carlson gets traded, something weird happens, but it's been a lot of depth trades today.
Yeah, there's really been no big blockbusters at all. All the Vancouver guys, it looks like they're staying for now. Klingberg to Minnesota, that should be interesting. It gives them at least another puck mover. His defense is not what it once was. I think he's kind of washed in the defensive zone at this point, but you're not getting him for that. You can probably pair him with Dumba. I think Brodin is there too. You can pair him with him if they want. So I think that's a fine addition.
We got the full details for the Troy Stetcher trade. So the Flames are getting Troy Stetcher and Nick
Ritchie for Brett Ritchie.
Yes, the Ritchie brothers getting traded for each other. And now we're going to get a million tweets about this is the first time two brothers have ever been traded before. Or
the insiders are working double time, Nick, for this.
Yes, this is what they get paid for is depth forwards and 6 defensemen 10 minutes after the deadline closes. Not like they're all on the same email list from Central Registry waiting for the email to go through. That's the other God, man. It's good that we got all the big fish out of the way because God, was it tiring reading the same 10 tweets every day. Oh, Timo Meier, maybe there's these teams. Patrick Kane only wants to go to the Rangers. Oh, Erik Karlsson, maybe to the Oilers. Just thank God. Now we can just talk about hockey. Thank God.
Now it's the sprint to the playoffs. We got 6 weeks left, I think, of the regular season. Mid-April is when they usually start. This is where it gets fun. Everyone is loaded up. You're ready to go. Games get more serious. The ace race is a lot closer this season. It's going to be fun, and I'm not used to a big playoff race like this. The Penguins are usually well ahead of everyone. So this has been a lot more nerve-wracking compared to most, but a lot of great games coming up down the stretch here. There's going to be games on ESPN, I think, every Saturday, which is going to help grow the game. Just don't tell Stephen A. Smith and Molly from First Take about that. But this is where it gets fun, and I'm really excited about it.
Oh, this is it might be hyperbole, it might be recency bias, but it feels like we're getting hockey closer to where we want it to be in terms of roster movement. Last summer, you really had the first handful of guys like Matt Kachuk, watershed moment saying, I don't want to stay here. Trade me now. Get something for me, whatever. Really a player of an elite player. Matthew Kachuk's one of the 10, 15 best players in the entire sport saying, I only want to go to one of these 5 teams. Trade me now, or I will make this a problem going forward. Watershed moment. You had Kadri wait and wait and wait, get a good landing spot. You had Johnny Gaudreau take agency into his own hands and say, I'm leaving. Not necessarily great for individual teams, but you want more movement. You want the players kind of in control. Movement helps grow the game. It helps more teams stay relevant when there are more players available to add. You saw it this year. Meyer, Kane, Tarasenko, you've seen a lot of really big name marquee players get moved. And you see a lot of teams going for it, and teams that aren't necessarily playoff teams. You saw the Islanders trade for Bo Horvat when they were 9 points back of a playoff spot. You saw the Sabres add guys the last couple of days. You see teams who are not in playoff spots going out and adding because they think they might be able to get in. That's good. When teams that are on the fence, it might not necessarily be good for those teams long term, because if you're constantly adding and you don't get in, that's not good. But in terms of just the health of the game, this feels like the first deadline where everybody's operating under the assumption that the cap's going to go up more than $1 million this summer, and everybody wants more talent. Everybody's operating under the assumption that we're going to get back to more of a forward, I don't want to say normal, because the NHL's never really been this vibrant in terms of transactions, but we're getting closer to where we want it to be.
I would say so, yeah. And I can only hope that the cap does actually go up at least a decent bit these next couple of years. I'm waiting for it to really skyrocket in the next maybe 3 to 5 years. I want it to have like a NBA leg jump. That's maybe some wishful thinking. Then some of these teams in cap hell can all of a sudden get out. But I mean, that's wishful thinking. It's not going to be like the NFL or something like that, where that just brings in so much money.
You got to think about it like this. The NHL, 82.5 million. The NFL ceiling is like 240.
Oh yeah.
You're talking about literally a third of the salary cap, because the NHL makes about a third of the revenue of the NFL. If the NHL can break 90 million as the cap ceiling within like 3 years, that's a win. That's legitimately a win for the league. You want these guys getting paid more. Because you got to think about it. The highest paid player in the league right now is Nathan McKinnon at 12.6. That's like the 9th guy in an NBA rotation. Like, that's somebody who plays 8 minutes a game in the NBA, makes 12.6 million a year. We're getting closer to where we want to be. God, that's weird. Jonathan Quick in Vegas Golden Knights stuff. God, that's weird. That's a weird one. I get it.
Get us a Kings Knights series, please. Inject that into my veins.
Hey, that was the series that started the Kings' miracle run to the Cup final. Was Kings Vegas. That it was a very weird series, but I think Vegas gets hot. They get Eichel going. They get Stone going. Anything can happen. Their goaltending situation is a mess. Like that it's not even a question. Their goaltending situation is an absolute mess. But if they can get average goaltending, that West is wide open. I could see them. I could see Minnesota. I could see Dallas. I could see Colorado, maybe even Seattle. I could really see like 5 or 6 teams coming out of the West, just because nobody's that set at goalie aside from Dallas. Nobody's that set at goalie, which really changes the ceiling for a lot of these teams. Like Edmonton.
If he plays the way he did against the Flames, I don't know who's going to take them down, because a hot goalie is a lot of times all you really need to go deep. But I like the Stars a lot. They're deep at forward. Heiskanen's disgusting on the back end. Peter DeBoer, and that's the thing. He's not that good of a coach, but when he first gets to a new team, that's usually when they do the best.
Yep.
Think like the Sharks, the Devils, the Knights, now Dallas. It's only after a couple years when things start to go sour. He has a very short shelf life as a coach. Colorado, obviously they're very deep. They're very good.
They got to get healthy.
And I'm sorry, I don't trust their goaltending. I mean, I just, Georgiev and I'm blanking on his name.
Pavel Francois.
Yeah, Francois, of course. I just don't trust them in a 7-game series. They've never really had to carry that kind of load before. I mean, Francois, he played a little bit for Darcy Kemper last season when he had that eye injury, but
yeah,
full 7-game series, it's just, I don't know if I fully trust that. But they have the forwards, the back end's nasty. They got the coach. Well, they just got to get those guys healthy. That's my thing. The West to the playoffs, I don't think most of those results would not surprise me. I think Seattle's good, but I don't think they can truly make a deep run if you're starting Martin Jones every game, Nick. I think that's just kind of, you're asking for too much there. But Jared McCann's been awesome, which has been, hurts me, of course, because he should probably still be here. But they're a deep team, and they're showing that this year. That the West is something else. And honestly, the West playoff race for the wild card spots is not really that active right now. Nashville's out. Calgary's kind of still in it, but
Calgary's done.
Yeah, I mean,
they really needed to turn it around. Their winning percentage, their points percentage has been diving the last couple of weeks. Real quick on Ottinger, and this is I cite this stat all of the time just to speak to how insane he was in that series against Calgary. He saved more expected goals in 7 games against the Flames than Darcy Kemper did the entire playoff run to winning the Stanley Cup. That is how good Jake Ottinger was in that first round series against the Flames.
I've never seen a goalie he was just purely standing on his head. And that game 7, especially in the overtime, save after save after save. Again, they get even close to that level of goaltending, they're going to cause a lot of problems because it's funny. They kind of did a retool on the fly. Jamie Benn is old, still good. But
he's playing better this year. He's playing a lot better this year. Same thing with Sagan. Sagan also finally got his hip taken care of, which was really an issue for a couple of years. Because the year they went to the Cup final, he was playing with his leg basically separated from his pelvis. That's how serious the injury Sagan was playing with, and had to get the bone filed down onto his hip so that he could walk right and skate right. And it's taken 3 years for him to get right from that injury. But he's been great. Ben's great. Jason Robertson's one of the 5 best left wings in the entire league. Yeah. Roope Hintz is one of the most underrated players in the entire league. Joe Pavelski's found the fountain of youth. They've got a really good forward group. Heiskanen, as you mentioned, is one of the best defensemen in the entire league. That team could go very far, man. They got the goalie. They've got high-end talent. That group is very good. We got about 5-10 minutes left before we wrap up here. We haven't touched on the Leafs, really. We haven't touched on Tampa, really. The Leafs, they know it. This is it. If they don't get it this time around, Kyle and Sheldon are done. They know they're both getting canned if the Leafs don't win a playoff series.
That scene, if they lose another first round series, this site is going to be a war zone. And I will be here for it no matter what. I don't care where the Penguins are at that point. It will be peak entertainment. And you're right. This is it. You went all in at the trade deadline. You made all
you got good pieces. You got good pieces.
They have a very, very good roster deep at forward. Your defense is good despite Jake Muzzin being out. You hopefully have your goalies that can play well in the playoffs. I still think the main question for me. Going up against Andrei Vasilevsky in a 7-game series, that's a big mismatch for me. But you have the forwards, have the defense. I think part of Kyle Dubas's moves were kind of a little like 2013 Ray Shero Penguin style, where you probably didn't need to do all this, but you're going all in just because you have to. You're right. You don't win at least around here, you're done. So is Sheldon. So is potentially a core piece for that team, because this is we're looking at here, Nick, 6, 7 of this core, something like that. Usually, if you don't win a playoff series in that many years, someone gets dealt. That's just the nature of the law in the NHL. The time is now. Tampa Bay, they're still kicking. They're still very good, though I wasn't too impressed with them when the Penguins just played them twice in the span of less than a week. But come playoff time, who is going to beat Andrei Vasilevsky in a 7-game series? Colorado did it because they were the more fresher team and they were the better team. But do we really trust Toronto to win 4 out of 7 here against that goalie? The Lightning are still deep. They got Tanner Janot recently. That's a very Lightning-like move, even though the asking price was probably ridiculous. But they're not really caring about that because they're in it to win it. So that's going to be a fun series. It's going to be an all-out war, to be honest, and I'm looking forward to it.
Can you lose 7 coin flips in a row? The Leafs are about to find out, because they've had 6 coin flip series in a row not go their way. And that's the thing here. You get in these 7-game series, you get to a game 7, you've lost a couple in overtime, you've been the better team in at least a handful of them, if not all. I would say close to half, if not more than half of them. It's the limitations of this format is the fact the Leafs have played 7 straight. They're going to play 7 straight series in the first round against a team that's as good, if not better than them. And they're really going to have a hard time. The Lightning are a team built for the playoffs. Their style really comes out. Victor Hedman kind of figured it out through December. He was playing terribly, and then he kind of just the light kind of came on for him, and they've been a lot better. They've had to scale back. They traded McDonough last summer. They've lost a lot of the depth pieces over the years. They lost Jan Ruda. They've lost a handful of guys over the last couple of years, but they're still going to be there at the end. I still think they probably end up beating Toronto because, as you said, Vasilevsky. I think they'll give the Bruins a hard time because the style of their team is built for the playoffs. And it makes the East is going to be awesome. The East is going to be such a good play. As a neutral party, if you're a casual hockey fan, this is going to be maybe the best playoffs you've ever seen.
All these series are just going to be awesome, man. Whether it's Boston playing whoever they get in the first round, Tampa, Toronto.
Sneaky for them, sneaky for the Bruins. The Islanders play the Bruins very well. For whatever reason, the Islanders have historically given the Bruins a hard time. You think about the playoff series 2 years ago, the first time the Bruins played the Islanders this year, it was a 1-1 game that went to a shootout. The last time they played 2 Saturdays ago, they got murdered. It was like 6-2 Bruins, 7-2 Bruins. But the Islanders have historically played the Bruins pretty well. That's a sneaky good matchup. But as you were saying, man, you get Rangers. Rangers Devils will be bad for everybody involved.
Oh, Nick, I know you're going to go out to Newark, the AKA just a total dump, and you're going to go to
Prudential Center's a nice arena.
No, just Newark, the city, just the city of Newark. That's all.
Prudential Center's a nice arena. The area around the Prudential Center is not bad. It's a nice area. I think the Rangers are going to have a hard time against the Devils. If I'm the Rangers, I would much rather play Carolina in the first round than play the Devils because I think the style matchup is a lot better for you. And if you play the Devils, the problem the Rangers have is the coach still thinks Jacob Trouba is his best defensive defenseman, which is just not true. And he's going to intentionally hard match Trouba Miller against Hughes. And we still got to see if Meyer's going to play with Hughes or with Heischer. But either one of those is just a terrifying proposition for a team that has one good defensive pair like the Rangers kind of are right now. Mm-hmm. So I would not want to play the Devils. I would much rather play Carolina. And then you hope the Devils lose to the Islanders or Pittsburgh in the first round, whoever that first wild card is. And then you play either the Islanders or Pittsburgh in that second round.
Yeah, I mean, and that series is going to be a total bloodbath too, separated by barely not even 20 miles. That's a rivalry that goes back a long ways. Obviously, we all know what happened last time they played in the playoffs, Nick. I don't need to remind you or anyone that listens to this show. The Devils, they're good. Don't get me wrong. I was very surprised at how they've done this season because I don't think Lindy Ruff is a good coach. I think they win in spite of him, to be honest.
Oh, I would agree with you.
But they have the forwards. Their defense is not bad, and they've also gotten pretty good goaltending for the most part this season. So, that's what obviously what you need to be a good team. I like them, but I just, again, I don't know if they can truly beat Shesterkin 4 times in a series. That's going to be very tough. Now, if Shesterkin plays the way he played in the first 4 games against the Penguins, maybe, but that's not going to probably be the case, to be honest, because he rebounded for the final 3 games. But that's going to be fun. You might have Carolina, Pittsburgh. Second round, you might have, Boston, Tampa, Rangers, Hurricanes, Rangers, whoever. The East is going to be in all out. Heck, even, I was thinking about this. Say Toronto beats Tampa in the first round. Oh, then you got to go play the Bruins. And
Leafs Bruins again. Oh, that would be like. And the fun part of that would be the Leafs fans would enjoy winning a playoff series for about a day. And then the next day after they've like spent the entire day being happy they made the second round, it would be, well, if we don't win the Stanley Cup, it's a failure. That's really the ironic part of this entire thing, especially about the Leafs, because everybody is just set the bar so low for them. Just win one round, just win one round, just win one round. And if they don't, everybody gets fired. If they do, here's the Bruins, who might have 140 standings points.
It's not good either way. And, they'll also try to beat Boston because they've had their number in every single series for as long as, I think we both have been alive. So, yeah, it's going to be a war. The West is more wide open, but the East is going to be a ton of fun.
Oh, playoffs are going to be great this year. The West is just going to be a treat. It's just going to be like, okay, the knife fight has ended. Let me watch this game of badminton now. That's going to be the difference between the East and West.
No, I would agree with that. And looks like, they finally announced the Kulikov trade. Okay. Third round pick in next year's draft. Whatever.
Yeah.
They got rid of McGinn's contract. That gives them some more salary cap space after the season's over. I have no idea if this guy's even going to play. The top 6 is set. We'll have to see. Anaheim's retaining. Okay. They're getting him for $1.12 million, whatever. But
if he's the 7th D, if he's slides
that's probably what he's going to be.
Yeah, that's fine. You need 7 guys for the playoffs anyway. If you don't have 7D, you're just underprepared.
They have him and Chad Ruedel as the 7 and 8 guys. They're not going to take out Brian Dumoulin. Sorry, that's not happening. And Pettersson and POJ have been awesome this season, so I just can't really see that. But looks like Sean might need me for a little segment here so I can crap on Hexall a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'm about to sign off. So we did about an hour, so that's
that's perfect.
Yeah. All right, friends, I hope everybody enjoyed the first ever Liberty Blue Pod trade deadline show. Andrew and I are going to record like a 30-minute episode sometime later tonight when Andrew gets out of work. That'll be up on all the podcast feeds later in the week. If you do not already follow Hunter, Hunter does great hockey stuff. Follow him on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Penguin-centric, but Hunter keeps an eye on most of the league. So he kind of like me, where he's keeping an eye on everything, likes to have a good barometer, understanding of where everyone's at. Hunter does good content. Support your content creators. So we'll see you back Monday, normal live stream time. Until then, enjoy your weekend, guys.